Let me start the camera. There we
Hello.
go. Jeez. Oh no, my hair. I've been wearing a beanie all morning and my hair's.
Hello. Good morning. Hi,
Hello.
Buzz.
Let's get comfortable.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Absolutely fine. Thank you ever so much for joining me.
No, my pleasure.
You panicked me a little bit when I saw this message flag up saying Buzz has admitted to Zoom. I was like, have I got the time wrong or something? But I really appreciate you. A mild little panic, but no, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, am I coming through backwards on this?
No,
No, that's right. It's just that's fine.
no, not at all. So you're Buzz Hicks. You're the chief instructor at the Skydive Tilstock Freefall Club.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'm just going to jump right in. What do you think is the biggest misconception about skydiving? So if someone's never done a jump before and they've done their first one and they talk to you, what is the thing that they most get wrong?
The skydivers are risk-taking, death wish having lunatics. Couldn't be further from the truth.
So,
I mean,
yeah. Sorry, after you, Buzz.
There's just the demographic of the jumpers that jump at my place. I've got 3 surgeons. One's a consultant thoracic surgeon, one is a neurosurgeon, and one is an eye surgeon. I've got a whole bunch of IT wallers. I've got people that work in local authority. You know, the whole gamut of society is laid bare on a skydiving drop zone, and that misconception that we're all risk takers living on the edge, just adrenaline junkies, is couldn't be further from the truth. If skydiving is a dangerous sport, I'm not going to say it's not dangerous. Absolutely, we do it because there's that element of danger, but it's a dangerous sport done as safely as we possibly can, because we want to do it more than once. You know, it's fun as being involved in something that you can only do once.
A question I've always wanted to know: how do you pack the chute? Is there a particular system you use so it opens up correctly? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so with what we call sports skydiving kit, we have 2 canopies. We don't call them chutes; we call them canopies. Our main canopy can be packed by the person that owns the equipment. You know, a packing course normally takes a day of training and then practice. And the more you practice, the quicker you become at it. And most people can pack their own parachute within 5 or 10 minutes. The second parachute that we have, or the reserve parachute, can only be packed by what we call an advanced packer or a rigger. And it takes much longer to get that qualification, and it takes much longer to actually pack the parachute, because it's got to be done so meticulously, because that reserve parachute is the person's last chance. So the main parachute, it's once you've got the basic techniques, it's fairly easy to pack. I could teach you in an afternoon.
And what would you say would be the most challenging part of a skydive? So is it jumping out the plane? Is it the landing? Or is it the free fall?
Each of those sections is really challenging in its own right, until you become confident and comfortable with getting out of the plane. Getting out of the door is that first big obstacle. You know, it's not natural for somebody to want to jump out of a plane unless the plane was on fire. And I think even then, most people would probably take their chances and staying on the aircraft. You know, if you fly with Jet 2 and the engine fails, you're not all going to start bundling for the door, because that's not a natural reaction. So getting over that fear of you're jumping out of a plane and you're expecting your parachute to work and save your life. Once you get over that, we call that gear fear, you know, the fear that your equipment's not going to work. So once you get over that gear fear and you're happy, yeah, I've done this X amount of times, every time I've got out, the parachute's opened. I might have had what we call nuisance factors to deal with, but it's nothing onerous. Your parachute's flying, you know how to fly it, you're happy where the ground is, and you become more comfortable with that. And then you have the issue of performance in air. So being able to skydive relative to other people. So then there's that. That's another separate anxiety, I guess, that people might have. And obviously, any landing, whether you're on a parachute or whether you are in a plane, is just a controlled crash landing. You're just crashing into the ground in a controlled fashion. Fortunately, with modern, what we call ram air parachutes, we've got the ability to slow down. We can steer them. They've got forward speed. They generate lift just like the wing of a plane, not as much, but we've got that ability to put ourselves where we want to be and land where we want to. So once people get that skill for landing, that just rounds off the whole thing. And I would say people probably, after jumping out of the plane, the landing's probably the thing that people worry about most, because that's the point at which you can really injure yourself if you get it wrong.
So I assume when you start off, you're doing tandem jumps. Is that right?
No, you don't have to do a tandem skydive at all. You can go straight in, and there's a couple of different training methods you can carry out. But yeah, you don't have to have jumped at all before you can learn to skydive. And we have quite a few people we've had people that have never jumped out of a plane, never been on a plane before, and the first time they've been on the plane is they've jumped out of it on their own. So yeah.
That thought is terrifying to me. But like you say, everyone assesses risk differently. Everyone processes risk different to each other. So if you are jumping out of a plane for the first time and you're doing this by yourself solo, does the instructor tell you when to launch the canopy? Sorry, do they give a nod or something?
So we've got two main entries. Well, there's only two entries into what we call sports skydiving. So if you take tandem skydiving, which is an excellent way for people to experience the thrill of free fall and decide whether it's for them without actually going on a training course. If you put tandem skydiving to one side, if you wanted to become a skydiver, you've got two options. One is what we call static line parachuting, which is what you may have seen traditionally, which is where you jump out of the plane at 3,500 feet. Your parachute is connected to the static line. It's a metal cable in the aircraft. That's a strong point. You exit the aircraft and the parachute deploys automatically. There's no free fall involved in the earlier jumps. That's just getting out of the plane, learning to fly your parachute and land safely. From that, you then progress up to jumping out and deploying the parachute on your own, and then again progress higher and higher and higher and carrying out different skills in air. So that's the static line progression system. And at that point, because the static lines deploying the parachute for the first couple of jumps, there's no real issue there. Once you get to free fall, you do it. We work on what we call a safety count. So you exit the aircraft, and your first jump you would count to 4, and then you would deploy your parachute, and then you would go on to what we call a 10-second delay. So you count to 10 and deploy your parachute, then 15, and then we work on heights. We have an altimeter on our wrist that tells us what height we're at, and then we know what height we need to deploy. The second training method is what we call accelerated freefall, and the name says it all. It's an accelerated way of getting into freefall, getting into skydiving. Both the static line and the AFF course have an initial day of training. We call that a ground school, and during that ground school, which is it's a common syllabus for both training methods, you learn everything you need to know about how to deal with nuisance factors, which is those issues that you can have with your parachute when it opens that we can deal with, how to deal with emergencies, how to fly your parachute, how to make sure you where you need to be, all those things. So they're quite similar on both courses, but where accelerated freefall differs is your very first jump on AFF, as we call it, is from at least 10,000 feet. We got to 10,000 feet here. Some places go a little bit higher. And then you have two instructors with you jumping at the same time. They're giving you in-air signals, giving you in-air coaching. You deploy the parachute yourself, by means of it's what we call a throwaway pilot chute. So it's a very small parachute that's packed onto the bottom of the parachute container, and the student will just pull it out, throw that into the slipstream, and that pulls the canopy out of the container and starts the deployment. So that the student's responsible for doing all that themselves, and then they fly and then the canopy themselves.
So if you're jumping from 10,000 feet, how long would you have free fall? Like, how many would it be seconds? Does it take
typically about 40 seconds or so
before you'd have to? Sorry.
It depends on a number of things. I'm a big lad. I fall through the sky faster than some of my jumpers that are half my size. So, surface area mass, that does have an effect. But that I'm not gonna. They're not going to be in free fall 30 seconds longer than me. It's you're talking a matter of 5 seconds or so over that kind of altitude. So yeah, about 40 seconds in free fall, jumping from 10,000 feet.
What does it feel like to be in free fall?
Amazing. It's just freedom. It's just it's a surreal experience. It's not something that you would, I would say it's not something that you would do every day, but quite obviously I would do it every day. Oops, sorry about that. It's you feel that initial blast of air, what we call the relative wind. So the plane's flying forward at about 80 miles an hour or thereabouts when you leave the aircraft. Some are a little bit faster, some are a little bit slower. So you open the door, it's just like sticking your head out the window when you're driving down the motorway at 70 miles an hour. So you feel that initial blast of air, but then as you exit the aircraft, you go from moving forward into a belly to earth position. So you have this kind of graceful arc where I'm using my hand to describe it. Sorry, I should have brought a little mannequin along so we'll show you. So as you come back into the belly to earth position, you've gone from moving forward to now you're going straight down. And again, you feel that wind resistance, you feel the relative wind. It's much stronger because you're now going much faster. You've gone from going forward at about 60 to 80 miles an hour to now falling straight down at about 120, 125 miles an hour. Some people have said it feels like you're lying on a pillow of air. It's an interesting feeling. And of course, everybody says, oh, I want to try skydiving because I'm scared of heights, or, I want to do a tandem skydive because I want to get over my fear of heights. You would be surprised how many skydivers are scared of heights. Myself, if you put me up a ladder, if I have to go up on the top of my hangar to do something, it's only 20 foot off the ground, I get up that ladder, I'm getting disco knee. Jumping out of a plane at 10,000 feet is a completely different and surreal experience. So you don't really get that sensation of height that you do at lower heights, if that makes sense. I know it sounds quite counterintuitive. And you don't really get that sensation that like being on a roller coaster either. I know some people say, oh, it's like a roller coaster. I hate fairground rides. You would not get me. I live in Shropshire. We're not far from Alton Towers. I'm not going on any of them rides in Alton Towers, big old scaredy cat me. But you do get that acceleration, that feeling of acceleration, the noise of the wind, the feeling of the wind. You're definitely, and I hate to sound too much of a hipster, but you definitely get that feeling of being at one with the elements, because you're in the air. That's helping you move around and do what you want to do in the sky.
In terms of the appeal of skydiving, I know you said there's the broad spectrum of people that it draws. You kind of touched on people doing it maybe because they're phobic of heights and stuff. Are people naturally curious about what it's like to jump out? Is there many reasons why people do it?
I think learning to skydive, to take part of it as a sport, I think initially the start of that journey is people want to push themselves. They want to experience something that has a perception of being dangerous. Touch wood, I don't want to jinx anything, but we've got an excellent safety record in the UK. We have very, very few skydiving fatalities. Okay. More people die on the roads, more people die cycling, fishing, horse riding. The thing is, when it happens skydiving, it's probably a fairly newsworthy story because somebody jumped out of a plane and they hit the ground. Yeah. But the reality of it is we make it as safe as we possibly can. We can't completely negate all the dangers, but the sport has come on so far nowadays. The equipment we use, the techniques we use, the materials we use really do make it as safe as we possibly can. So people, they've got that perception that skydiving is a dangerous sport, which it is. It's just done safely, and they want to push themselves, and then they get into it, and then I often say skydiving it's almost Marmite. You'll either do a jump and you go like, yeah, okay, I've done that. That's the box ticked, or you'll be like, I've done that. This is all I want to do for the rest of my life. And it's almost that that binary. It's almost that polar difference between, yeah, I've done it, that's all great, I'm not bothered, to this is all I want to do. I'm going to go live on the DZ, learn to pack, learn to skydive through packing parachutes, and become what we call a DZ bum, living on a caravan, eating spam fritters, the kind of thing. And that kind of thing does get people the lifestyle, the camaraderie. We're very lucky here. We're only a small club. We're one of the smallest parachuting clubs in the UK. We are the longest continually operated skydiving location in the UK. There's been skydiving here since the mid-60s. But we've got this amazing club atmosphere, and it really is like a family. And I think a lot of people find something that they didn't know they were looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they were looking for something else.
Would you say that it's fairly well represented in terms of gender? Do you have a fairly equal mix of men and women, or is it predominantly men that do the
Absolutely
sports?
Not. Skydiving in the UK is predominantly a male sport. Now, the interesting thing is there are more men skydiving in the UK, but at a competition level, at an international competition level, our female skydivers are the ones that are winning gold medals at international competitions. At national competitions, even though women represent, I think it's about 20%, 25% of the makeup of British skydiving's our national governing body. So even though there's about 25% of women skydivers, on a competition level, it's at around about 50 to 70%. The top teams in the UK are predominantly female led, which is amazing. And we at Tilstock, my wife's just about to come back and it's going to get noisy. So can we just pause this and I can go find another room to go into?
Yeah,
sorry.
Sure, no problem. Again, we're back on, Buzz.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So
no problem.
Getting back to representation in sport. So more men skydive than women, but the women tend to be better skydivers, which is amazing. At Tilstock, you might notice that in our logo, we've got the rainbow. We have, every year we hold the Rainbow Boogie, which is the UK's only LGBT focused skydiving event. And last year we also started a women only event, which you might think, how does that help equality by having a segregated event? But just allowing women to be in an environment where there was just women, the progression that came over, seeing these female skydivers, some who were going to leave the sport, decide that, this is what we want to do. It was very important. So this year we're going to do that. Next year we're going to have another women only event, and that will probably become a regular part of our calendar. So we're certainly leading the way in that environment, in that respect.
In terms of gear, is it an expensive sport to get involved with?
Absolutely. Most of the equipment, skydiving equipment, is made in the US. So your parachute system, or a rig, as we call it, as effectively 3 component parts. You've got the parachute harness, which is the container that holds the parachutes, the parachutes themselves, and then we've got something else called an automatic activation device, which is a safety device that will automatically start the deployment of the deployment sequence of the reserve, or activate the deployment of the reserve should this jumper not do anything. So those three component parts, the containers predominantly are made in America, the canopies predominantly are made in America, and the automatic activation devices are predominantly made in Europe. There are some European manufacturers of parachute equipment, but the most popular stuff is made in the States. So the dollar is really strong against the pound at the moment, so that adds everything up, and then you've got import duty and tax on that. So if you were to buy a set of made to measure equipment with your main parachute, your reserve parachute, your container, and your automatic activation device, you're looking at probably the thick end of 9 or 10 grand.
Wow.
And for a set of tandem equipment, you're looking at 15 grand. And then that's just the parachute system. Then you've got your jumpsuit that you're wearing. Now, depending on what kind of discipline you're doing, whether you're doing what we call formation skydiving, which is where people fly in a belly to earth orientation together, you'd have a specific jumpsuit to fly formation skydiving. Then we've got free flying, which is where people are jumping in an orientation other than on their belly, so in what we call head up or head down. That would be a different type of jumpsuit. Jumpsuits nowadays are going at around £400-500 a shot. There's a couple of manufacturers in the UK, but again, the majority of those are either in the States and some are in Europe. Headwear, people are now wearing full face helmets that have got impact protection in them. You're looking at £500-600 for one of those. Then altimeters, again, they're a couple £100. Modern digital altimeters, £400-500. So yeah, equipment wise, it's expensive. But once you've got that equipment, it does tend to last quite a long time.
So going back to like the canopy, would that be something you'd have to replace every couple of years, or would it last you a lifetime?
Parachutes typically will last 1,000-1,500 jumps, maybe more, depends on how well they've been looked after, how long they've been left out in the sun, that kind of thing. Yeah. You would change the lines on the parachute. So the parachute, the actual canopy itself is connected to the harness by a set of lines, strings. People call them strings, lines, or ropes. They will stretch or shrink depending on the kind of material they're made out of and wear. So they're typically replaced every 300 to 500 jumps, depending on the material. So on a per jump basis, the cost of the equipment isn't too expensive. It's just that initial outlay to buy it.
And do you need to hire a pilot and a plane? Is that something you do?
Yeah, I mean, we don't hire pilots. We're very fortunate because the way it's laid out in the UK is somebody with a private pilot's license can fly our plane for skydiving. And fortunately, if you've got a private pilot's license, you can't be paid for flying. But then they get to fly this nice big plane for free. Whereas if they were to go and hire a much smaller plane, it'd cost them, £100-150 an hour. So people are quite happy to come and fly just because it's time flying. The plane, some places lease aircraft. We own the aircraft that we jump out of, although we've only got a small aircraft at the moment. We've got a little 7-seater piston engine, so it's basically like a massive car engine in the front of it, which makes it quite slow and means we can't go as high as we'd like to. Some of the drop zones have got turbine aircraft. That's basically a jet engine in the front, turboprop, like you would get on the plane you fly to Spain on or whatever. They're much more expensive, but they're much more efficient. They fly higher, they fly faster. But I mean, that's the next step for us is to get a turbine aircraft.
In terms of, you mentioned that there's a sport like you can skydive at a sport level. How
Yeah.
does that work? So what are the rules of the sport? Do you need to get to the ground quickest, or is there maneuvers that you need to perform?
There are a number of different disciplines in our sport. So we've got, as I said, we've got formation skydiving. So formation skydiving is where you're falling through the air and you're effectively making patterns in the sky with other people. With formation skydiving, we have 4-way, which is 4 people falling through the sky together, and 8-way. Those are the 2 main national competitions. So once you've learned to skydive, you first learn to skydive on your own. You first learn to fall through the air, deploy your parachute, move, turn, go fast, go slow, move sideways, forwards, and backwards. All that stuff is done on your own and then on a one-to-one basis with a coach. You then work up to doing what we call 4-way. And once you're qualified as a formation skydiver, you can then start entering competitions. And there are different levels to competition. So if it's your first season, you would typically be what we call a rookie. And then there are 3 other categories, A, AA, and AAA. And each of those categories, the formations that you have to make in the sky are progressively harder. So that's formation skydiving. Then we've got VFS, which is vertical formation skydiving, which is where it's a similar premise to formation skydiving, but rather than being belly to earth, you're in different orientations. So either head up, so what we call sit flying, or head down, or any combination thereof. So there's FS, VFS. Then we've got accuracy, which is where you're landing on a tuffet, which has got a 10 centimeter disc, and you have to be as accurate as you can. What else have we got? Speed skydiving, so people falling through the sky, going as fast as they can. And the discipline that I like is what we call canopy piloting. So with canopy piloting, you're aiming to fly your parachute across the ground, horizontal, flat and level, as fast and as far as you can. So canopy piloting is another discipline in the sport. And with that, you've got speed, accuracy, and distance as well. So lots and lots of ways for people to compete.
And final question, have you got any ambitions that you'd like to do with skydiving? Are there any things you haven't done yet?
Oh, probably. I mean, I run a drop zone, so that's pretty much. I wouldn't say it's the pinnacle, but it's something that I really enjoy, and not a lot of people do it. There's only 29 parachute centres in the UK, so there's only 29 people that do what I do. I'm also an instructor examiner, so I'm responsible for bringing on new instructors into the sport for British skydiving. Skydiving wise, no, I'm pretty happy with where I am. I've had a bash at most disciplines. I think for me, actually, just getting that turbine aircraft. Once we get the turbine aircraft and we can go faster and we can fly quicker, we can increase how many people we get here. We can do more fun stuff. So I'm quite happy with where I am actually, skydiving wise.
Thank you, Buzz, for talking. It's been fascinating hearing about skydiving. It's one of those things. I think people know a lot about. Well, they hear about, but they don't know a lot about it. But it is interesting hearing you talk about some of the different aspects of it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's been really enjoyable.